HelixSleep.com and get up to $200 off during their holiday sale.
6:37 in the AM 560 Traffic Center. Here is Jim Telemonte.
Metra has manpower issues on the Union Pacific North Line. Metra says train 310 will not operate due to those issues. Eden's Expressway is clear, no delays to report on the Kennedy. The Eisenhower is fine. Inbound Stevenson at California, there's crashes reported on the exit ramp. Otherwise, the Stevenson is pretty clear. Inbound Ryan, traffic moves nicely. Outbound as well. No delays to report on I-57 or the Bishop Ford Freeway. Traffic on the tollways flows without delay. I-80 looks great. No problems to report in Northwest Indiana. Careful around Chicago Public Schools. They're back to class today. Early start after the break, after the strike, which happened last year. That's traffic. I'm Jim Calamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Some sun this morning, turning cloudy by the afternoon. High of 46, currently 38. Next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning. Happy 2020, Dan and Amy. Marco Rubio gave this speech at Catholic University in the fourth quarter of last year. We talked about it on this show. He and Josh Hawley, Republican senator from Missouri, are really presenting a paradigm shift for the Republican Party, the institutional Republican Party, when it comes to economic philosophy. Marco Rubio introduced what he called the idea of common good capitalism. And if this is the way the Republican Party chooses to go, then win or lose in 2020, Trumponomics is going to be the economic philosophy of the Republican Party. Is that a good thing or bad thing? Listen to what Senator Rubio had to say.
What we need is to restore common good capitalism. What is common good capitalism? It's a system of free enterprise in which workers fulfill their obligation to work and they enjoy the benefits of their work, and where businesses enjoy their right to make a profit and reinvest enough of those profits to create dignified work for their workers and for America. And our current government policies today get this wrong. We actually reward and incentivize certain business practices that promote economic growth, but it's growth that often solely benefits shareholders at the expense of new jobs and better pay.
And Rubio concludes with the big question.
Does our country exist to serve the interests of the market? Or does the market exist to serve the interest of our nation and of our people?
For more on this conversation, we're pleased to be joined again by Jim Pinkerton. He's the co-chair of Rate Coalition and a contributor to the American Conservative as well as Breitbart. He wrote about this in response to some of the flack Rubio was taking from conservatives, including me. But it should be a good conversation. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. So you're relatively sanguine about this notion of common good capitalism that Rubio outlined, yes?
Yes, I think he's on the right track, both politically and also strategically. One of the points he makes in his speeches, the speech you mentioned and cited to the Catholic University, he also gave a speech to the National Defense University, which is a Pentagon agency, and talking about, for example, the common good includes the common safety, and so it's been nuts for the last few decades that we've allowed all of our mines and refineries to deal with what they call rare earth elements, which are a category of 24 or so elements with crazy names like scandalum and yttrium and so on, that nobody's heard of but are vital to electronics and cell phones and computers and so on. And you can't make these high-tech devices without these obscure elements, and we over the last few decades, our production has gone to zero, and our imports from China have gone to nearly 100%. And so it's crazy to think about American security, let alone a commonwealth, if we're importing things we desperately need from a potential rival and adversary. So, I mean, Rubio is putting forth a kind of a comprehensive take on improving the lives of the average American.
Yeah, but
as well as keeping us all safe.
But here's the thing. I mean, we could have the conversation about the narrow strategic interests as it pertains to weapon systems that you're talking about with rare earth. But as you say, he's proposing a sort of a comprehensive philosophy that should drive public policy. And when he asked the question, should we serve markets or should markets serve us? Isn't that a false choice? And isn't that government centric? Markets are just people freely exchanging goods and services. Markets do serve us, and we serve markets simultaneously because it's human interaction. And my concern about common good capitalism is that capitalism doesn't need a modifier. And it sounds very much like compassionate conservatism under George W. Bush, which didn't need a modifier but gave us a new entitlement, or the kinder, gentler conservatism under H.W. Bush, which gave us tax increases and government mandates. Anytime somebody's in the business of sort of redefining in a sentimental way, an economic, just economics, I'm concerned.
Well, okay, but take this issue with the market. In a globalized economy, the world market is 7.8 billion people, including 1.4 billion Chinese, and by contrast, America is 330 million. So, to say that there's the market should rule is really to say that 95% of the people who shape the market are outside of the United States, and that begs the question as to whether or not those 95% who live outside of the United States are in any way, concerned or want to help the United States by itself. I mean, we can't kid ourselves. There is such a thing as the national interest. We do have an interest in seeing that, elderly people get their Social Security checks, and that the American people are defended, and that children get educated, and that the environment be protected. It's just not obvious to me that Russia and China and Iran and Syria and the Congo care all that much about how well off we are. So to some extent, I think Rubio is correct that you have to take conscious steps to protect the streets of Chicago or the schools of Evanston or the environment of Berlin. I mean, you have to think positively about that. You can't just leave it to the free market, which unfortunately has kind of turned into some combination of Silicon Valley tech companies and Chinese manufacturers. I don't think that's quite the formula for keeping the average American well off.
Right. I don't care if Chase Bank cares about me to use their services. I mean, the business relationship, these business transactions, they're not based in caring. They're based on mutual interests. I don't care if the Chinese care about me or not. But if I can increase my purchasing price through Chinese purchasing power through Chinese imports, that improves my life. Then that's a good thing.
Well, unless, of course, the Chinese improve your life by selling you an iPhone, it turns out to be with a back door to China. In other words,
well, I understand.
You go to the Pentagon.
Yes. I understand fraud.
Every soldier in the Pentagon carries a Chinese-made iPhone. Does that strike you as a good formula for keeping America safe in the 21st century?
Well, again, I think there's the conversation about sort of narrow strategic concerns, and then there's the larger question about how to organize a free society and allow people to pursue their own economic interests. I mean, when Marco Rubio says, markets serve us, well, who's going to determine what my economic interests are? The government? I'd rather have 80 million American families determining what their economic interests are individually than Marco Rubio telling us what our interests are.
Well, that doesn't apply to pollution. It doesn't apply to crime. It doesn't apply to public education. I mean, those are issues that, long ago, and I mean, since the inception of the United States, we've sort of agreed that either a state government or a federal government would have some role to play in establishing standards, weights and measures in commerce and so on. I mean, this country would be a very poor country were it not for the interstate highways and the railroads and the St. Lawrence Seaway, the canal from, to the Atlantic Ocean. In other words, there's things that the government has done to establish infrastructure, for example, that have made 100% of us better off. Again, I'm not for big government, and I don't think Rubio is either. I think what you do see, though, is that if the government is completely clueless about the well-being of Americans, then you have open borders and mass immigration and the wipe out of American industry, including in places like the Great Lakes. These might be good for from the point of view of a global market. Of course, people in Mexico would be better off living in Illinois. I don't think that's necessarily good for Illinois, and I don't think it's good to see. I grew up in Chicago, and so I remember what it's like when there were factories everywhere, and now they're all gone. And I think that's a degradation not only of our national security, but also of our standard of living.
Well, do you think that this is at all politically risky for Rubio?
Is it politically risky to him?
Yeah.
Well, yes. He's definitely getting fire, as I noted in my piece to the American Conservative, National Review, which is sort of the former flagship of American conservatism. I mean, three writers attacked him rather strongly. One of them called him a fascist, as in Mussolini or Hitler, which I thought was kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's a little extreme.
But there is a fair number of people on the right who are sort of libertarian believers, and they're quite hostile to Rubio. And he's got his share of enemies, I suppose, just across the party. However, the idea of a balanced approach to freedom and economic self-interest. A lot of, as Rubio said in that speech to Catholic University, a lot of it comes from a famous papal encyclical from 1890, Rerum Novarum, which is Latin for "of new things," issued by Pope Leo XIII, in which Leo attempted on behalf of Catholics and Christians to say, look, capital has and business have rights, but so does labor, so do ordinary people. There should be a harmony of rights and responsibilities between capital and business, and it should include the right of private property, but should also include fair wages for workers and so on. And it's quite a profound document, written 130 years ago. And I think very much shaping the 20th century, especially the Christian democratic parties of Europe, but also, to no small extent, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party here. I think Rubio is tapping into a very powerful vein of sentiment about how you make a better society and a better country, although he does, as you say, have his critics.
Speaking of important documents, you write in reference to the U.S. Constitution, to the Federalist Papers, in response to the machete attack at the synagogue in New York, in response to the shooting in White Settlement, Texas. The left is really struggling to continue to make guns and gun owners the bad guy in the wake of what happened in White Settlement.
Well, yeah, this Texas, I think as far as Texas is concerned, the idea that you're going to ban guns or ban carrying guns is sort of the argument is kind of over. This shooting in this church where this marksman shot the guy in the head with one shot from across the room. It's so profound in terms of as you said about a different subject earlier, a paradigm shift of who's going to provide security. I mean, it's great. The cops were on their way, and they were there within a minute or two. But in that minute or two, inside that church, that psycho, could have killed, tens, dozens, hundreds of people. Who knows? And so,
yeah,
as I wrote,
the arguments about it are just from the left, or even from sort of the some on the center right that favor things like assault weapon bans and so forth. So interesting. So what Jack Wilson did in taking down that shooter, that was great. But the fact that there were another half dozen congregants there who are armed, that's very troubling. Are we in a society now where, as one op-ed writer said, cover me, I'm going to communion, where everybody has to have a gun everywhere? And I just found that so tone deaf and such a reach, because nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying you have to do this or you have to do that. What they're saying is, I want to be able to protect myself wherever I feel I need the desire, wherever I feel I may need to protect myself, whether that's completely rational based on the percentages or not. Yes, mass shootings, being involved in mass shooting, infinitesimal probability that you will ever be in one. But Jack Wilson and those congregants were in one in White Settlement, and thank God Jack Wilson was there. There's no mandate here. You're just saying law-abiding citizens should be able to do what those congregants did.
It's really hard to argue the logic that Wayne LaPierre said, the National Rifle Association said in 2012. The only solution to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and that's just whether you think it's the cops or Jack Wilson or the other people in the congregation. There's somebody a psycho running loose trying to kill people. What do? This is not the time to read him his Miranda rights. And so, I mean, as the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein wrote decades ago, an armed society is a polite society. So, I think people who support, and the point I made in that article for Breitbart was, look, this is a states' rights issue. Texas has one view of how to keep a church safe, and New York has another view. I think a lot of people in New York are saying, gee, I wish we were more like Texas. That's an issue for New Yorkers to settle out with, Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, who seem kind of talk about tone deaf. They seem completely tone deaf to the surge in crime, which I guarantee is going to have a lot of New Yorkers thinking about either leaving or buying guns, because again, nothing responds quicker to a threat than having a handgun on your person. I mean, these are not easy issues, but sometimes they become really, really clear, as in Fort Worth, Texas.
Jim Pinkerton, co-chair of Rate Coalition, contributor to the American Conservative and Breitbart. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning. Bye-bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Greg Clugston in for Lou Dobbs, who returns Monday. It's back to work on Wall Street. Another move to take Saks Fifth Avenue private. Those stories next.
Hi, I'm Karen, owner of Lone Star Transfer. If you are a timeshare owner, getting out is probably a top priority. And now that annual maintenance fees are coming due, this ongoing burden and expense is at the top of your list. Thankfully, we can help. Let us do for you what we have done for thousands of others across the country. Our process is done legally, ethically, and quickly. Lone Star Transfer has a 99% success rate and an